Hi, and welcome back to the Aromanosis YouTube channel. I've just hopped on today because there's something that's been on my mind and I felt like I wanted to share it on here. So I've been working with a group of women in the Alchemy of Menopause live online class, a really strong, badass group of women. And part of the journey of perimenopause to becoming a wise elder and really stepping into our wholeness is about working really quite closely with what is our inner masculine. So in the world, each one of us, according to Jungian concepts, has an inner contrasexual partner. So women have an inner masculine. And it doesn't matter what our gender our gender preferences in terms of our partners. This is not about male and female. These are about two forces. You could call them yin and yang, Shakti, Shiva. It's just these two forces that come together for us to create something. Could be a baby, but it can also be creative life or a creative project or just being a creative being. And in working with this energy and trying to identify what's going on in our inner masculine, I'm brought to the words of Marion von Franz, who says the wound, or our wound, is the wound. So what's going on inside us and the wounds we're trying to heal are reflected in the collective wound. There's no difference really. It's just a micro and a macro example of the wounds that we're trying to work with. And these collective wounds are a lot to do with how the masculine and the feminine energies, or these opposing energies, night and day, yin and yang, work together. They're natural forces. And because we've been living in a world of patriarchy for so many hundreds of years, the inner masculine, that is an autonomous part of ourself, we can't control it, has, like men in the outer world, has been in a way shaped by the patriarchy over generations. And patriarchy is not the masculine. It's a power force. It's a force that wants power. And so there's been this false amalgamation between the masculine in the outer world often and the inner masculine and patriarchy. So with the group of women, we've been working with the inner tyrant because there's a lot of tyrannical energy in the world. And we've seen that building in a way over the last 10 years, especially in politics, which is really takes the world stage all over the world, and everybody now, because of internet, can see it. So out of the collective unconscious, which is the world stage, comes these forces, and we've been seeing these tyrannical forces all over the world popping up, and we don't have to really name them. Everybody knows who they are in the political world anyway. And in a way, these tyrannical forces are showing us what's inside ourselves, because over generations, our inner masculine, for women, has been shaped and internalized these tyrannical forces as well. Each one of us in our ancestral journeys can notice, if we look at the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, that where is the tyranny and how have we internalized that? So that's a lot of what we've been working with in the group. And then finally, nearer the end of the class ended last week, there we have this war that breaks out between Russia and Ukraine, and we see sort of coming out of the collective unconscious this ultimate tyrannical energy or archetype, and it's as if this progression has been rising until we get the ultimate explosion. It's like the friction bursts into flames and the action of the tyrant starts to break out of the archetype and actually have an effect in the world. And so that's interesting in itself, because I believe the only way to really help is to ask ourselves, have I worked with the inner tyrant? Have I identified, have I brought the inner tyrant out of the shadow so that I can disactivate him in a way by looking him straight in the face? Because what stays in the shadow, and especially for women, because our contrasexual partner is of course in the shadow, especially if we identify very much as a woman, it's deeply in our shadow, and what stays in the unconscious or in the shadow has a lot of control over us. Controls us without us knowing, because we're unaware of it. So if we can identify by looking in our ancestral lineages, looking at what we've internalized as the masculine and how much our masculine has identified with the tyrant. I put a face to my tyrant. I decided it was my hidden grandfather's face. I never met him. He died when I was 14. He was a gangster, and he was very cruel to my mother and her mother and her sister for various reasons. And so I was able to put his face. It's not just he wasn't the tyrant. The tyrant actually went up until my great-great-grandmother and the colonization of India. And so there was a tyrannical force that came through my mother line. And I had internalized it. That's why many women in today's world, it's surprising, because many women within the families, within the communities, uphold patriarchy in some ways more than men. And it's because it's in their shadow, it's controlling them. So there we were doing this work, and then as we looked deeper into what was happening, as the days sort of continued with this war, we realized there was this another archetype rising from the collective unconscious. And this time it wasn't tyrannical. And in the face of Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, we were getting a new archetype coming forward, something different. Something that was shocking not only to the tyrant, but really unsuspected to the world until it came forward. And I think that's a very positive thing. If you go back to this idea of what is inside us is also in the collective, and what happens on the world stage is really for us to see how it mirrors what's happening inside ourselves. So it feels like we're ready to welcome and to find within ourselves the inner sacred masculine. So by identifying and using the tyrants that are in the world to help us be honest with ourselves and say, hang on, what tyrannical energy have I internalized in my inner masculine? Disactivate that and allow for the ostracized sacred masculine to have his place. And I think this is really, really positive. So that's what I came on to say, that yes, it's terrible and frightening and terrifying that this war is going on in the world. But if we can look at it in terms of what it mirrors inside ourselves and the work that we have to do, not just men. It's not just about men having to, be nice to women and et cetera, et cetera. No, women as much as men are carrying the tyrannical energy, and even more so because it's in their shadow. And as I said, what's in our shadow has control over us. So this really is a responsibility, and to become a wise elder, to really step into the place that the crone needs to step into, I think this is really important work. And so even though it's frightening, there's a gift in what's happening on the world stage if we can bring it back to ourselves and work through it on an individual level. So the oils I wanted to suggest, if you did want to do some journeying and start to make contact with your sacred inner masculine, are tree oils. Tree oils are really great for working with this part of ourself because, they're like a pillar between the earth and the sky. So they help that connection between yourself as a woman and your inner masculine. The oil that I really, really like for connecting with my inner masculine is Scots pine. Scots pine is an oil that's really about structure, but more than that, it's about support, loving support, unconditional loving support. And that's really what the masculine does to the feminine within us. We've got both. It's not about male doing that to female, it's about masculine doing that to feminine. Our spirit, our masculine energy, the yang, supports and cherishes and loves our being, our matter, our feminine. And so Scots pine is really good. If you have a labdanum or galbanum, both those oils are powerful oils for working with the shadow. And as this part of ourselves is deeply ingrained in our shadow when we're women, they are great oils for, you can pair them. You could even put labdanum and the Scots pine, but they will really help you to access these shadow aspects of yourself. Make a good intention. Maybe I could do a journey to lead you to the sacred masculine on here, or maybe on my website. I'll let you know. Subscribe to the channel and then you get to find out about these things. What other oils? Yeah, so I would stick at that. The tree oils, labdanum and galbanum, are great for connecting with the masculine. And when I talk about the masculine, I talk about the sacred masculine. The tyrant is a power structure that has mistakenly identified with this patriarchal power that's dominated the world, and it's nothing to do with being masculine. So lots of love, and I hope that made some sense. Please join our channel if you're interested in hearing more.